Have you ever wondered what it would be like to venture deep into the unknown, to push through twisting passages and tight, dark spaces where every step is a mystery? A group of excited newcomers set out to explore the mysterious cave in Pigeon Mountain with a few experienced guides, hoping for a day of discovery. But deep inside, in the shadowy twists of the cave, things took a sudden, dangerous turn. A slip, a fall, and the echoing sound of helmets hitting rock shattered the group's excitement, replacing it with tension and fear. Trapped in the dark, with injuries and the unknown surrounding them, the question became clear. Would everyone make it back to the surface? Let's find out together what went wrong in these cave walls. Nestled on the east side of Pigeon Mountain in Walker County, Georgia, Petty John's Cave, also known as Wilson's Cave, is a fascinating karst cave with a rich geological and cultural history. Located in the scenic Appalachian Plateau, this cave stretches an impressive 31,490 feet, making it one of the longest caves in the United States. With depths reaching 235 feet, Petty John's Cave is a destination that attracts explorers and splunkers eager to witness its incredible underground formations, wildlife, and unique cave rooms. Petty John's Cave is known for its beautiful limestone formations, a result of millions of years of geologic processes. The region's acidic groundwater has slowly dissolved the Paleozoic limestone, creating the distinct karst landscape, which is common throughout northwest Georgia and the Appalachian Plateau. Inside the cave, explorers can find a variety of speleothems, such as stalactites, which hang from the ceiling, and stalagmites, which rise from the floor. These formations are joined by others like soda straws, delicate cave pearls, flowstones, and the unique cave popcorn, each adding to the natural beauty of this underground wonder. One of the cave's most famous features is the worm tube, a narrow 150-foot passageway that requires cavers to crawl on their hands and knees. This challenging yet thrilling crawl leads to the Echo Room, a wide chamber where visitors can experience the resonance of their voices bouncing off the walls. Another popular area within Petty John's Cave is the Bridge Room, where explorers can dangle their feet over an edge and listen to the sound of a stream flowing over 80 feet below. These highlights are part of the approximately 6.5 miles of mapped underground trails, which wind through intricate passages and spacious chambers. Petty John's Cave is also home to various species of bats, including tricolored and little brown bats, which use the cave for hibernation during the colder months. The constant above-freezing temperatures in the cave create a safe haven for these bats, who feed on small insects like beetles and moths found in the region. The history of Petty John's Cave began with a survey conducted by Richard Schreiber in 1969, which revealed the cave's intricate network of tunnels and chambers. That same year, the Crockford Pigeon Mountain Wildlife Management Area was established, which now protects over 20,000 acres, including several other wild caves. Named after the original landowner, John Pettyjohn, the cave is sometimes referred to as a sacrifice cave because it welcomes recreational explorers, which helps protect other caves in the area by drawing foot traffic here instead. Accessible via a path from a gravel parking area off Rocky Lane, Petty John's Cave has become a popular spot for adventurers seeking the thrill of navigating its dark corridors, narrow crawl spaces, and breathtaking underground scenery. While the entrance to the cave is spacious at around 10 meters high, the cave soon narrows, providing a range of spaces from grand chambers to tight passages that require both courage and careful exploration. On the cool, dim morning of September 22nd, 1984, an adventurous group from the Georgia Nature Conservancy gathered at Petty John's Cave on Pigeon Mountain, Georgia. This wasn't just any outing. It was an exciting opportunity for Conservancy members to experience firsthand the thrill of caving. Most of these 28 people had never set foot inside a cave before, and though they were ready for a day of exploration, they were about to discover just how intense and unpredictable cave exploration could be. To guide the Conservancy members, 5 experienced cavers joined the group, prepared to lead them on a safe but thrilling tour through one of Georgia's most popular wild caves. Their plan was to stick to relatively straightforward areas, including the big room and the flat room, with a challenging route through the Z bends. Altogether, they aim to cover about 2,000 feet of the cave's underground passageways before looping back out. Though the trip wasn't meant to push anyone too hard, it would still introduce the group to the challenges of navigating tight spaces and uneven terrain. In preparation for the trip, each member was provided with a hard hat and a handheld flashlight. However, these hats lacked chin straps, and their lights, though functional, were not as secure or convenient as the headlamps that are typically worn by seasoned cavers. The group's physical readiness was mixed. Some were in fair condition, while others hadn't experienced such physical challenges before. The adventure ahead would require a lot of crawling, climbing, and squeezing, demanding both courage and endurance. To manage the large group, the experienced cavers split them into two smaller groups of 14 people each. Each group would follow the same planned route through the cave, maintaining a safe distance apart. Leading the first group was Chuck House, a seasoned caver known for his calm demeanor and quick thinking. The second group was led by Alan Paget, a dedicated nature enthusiast and cave leader with years of experience navigating Pettyjohn's tight twists and turns. Both groups began their journey with excitement and curiosity, descending carefully into the cave's welcoming darkness. Once inside, the thrill of exploration filled the air. The initial descent brought the groups to a wide open area known as the Big Room. For many, seeing the high ceilings and dramatic rock formations in this spacious area was a mesmerizing introduction to the underground world. From here, the path led them down toward the Flat Room, a lower chamber with a smoother floor where they could take a short break and enjoy the impressive rock formations. As they continued, however, the route grew more challenging, and the tight squeezes and darker spaces began to unsettle a few of the less confident explorers. It wasn't long before the confined spaces became too much for some. 4 people in the first group, struggling with the narrow paths and the weight of the unfamiliar surroundings, decided that they'd had enough and they wanted to leave the cave. Chuck House quickly organized an escort to take them back towards the entrance. As they made their way back up from the Flat Room, the route grew steeper and more slippery. At one point, Chuck's companion, Bill Franks, misstepped, slipping down the incline. He fell around 6 feet, and then he rolled another 15 feet down a slope, striking his head against a rock as his hard hat flew off. The impact left him with a small cut on his scalp that began to bleed. Howes leapt into action, helping Frank sit up and checking him for more serious injuries. But fortunately, aside from the scalp cut, he seemed to be in good shape. After stopping the bleeding, House helped Franks make his way back out of the cave. Franks exited on his own, shaken but largely unharmed. Meanwhile, Howes' quick response had prevented a minor incident from turning into something much worse. Now, while House was assisting Franks and the other retreating members, the second group continued with their route. They had successfully navigated the tricky Z bends, which is a winding section of tight, twisting passages, and they were on their way back up toward the Big Room when trouble struck again. Robert Boone, one of the members in Paget's group, had been struggling with the tight spaces and exhausting crawls. His physical condition, combined with the demands of the caving environment, was beginning to take a toll. As Boone approached a slope leading into the Big Room, he slipped, losing his balance and tumbling down the incline. His hard hat slipped off as he fell, and he landed hard on a pile of rocks at the bottom. The impact was severe. Boone hit his head and fell unconscious, bleeding heavily from a deep cut on his scalp. Paget reacted immediately, rushing down to where Boone lay, unconscious and bleeding. Boone's breathing was shallow, and his position made it difficult for him to get air. Quickly and carefully, Paget rolled Boone onto his back and adjusted his position to clear his airway, helping him to breathe more easily. Then, he applied pressure to Boone's head wound to control the bleeding. It was now 3:56 p.m., and the situation was becoming increasingly dire. Knowing that they needed more help, Paget sent one of the experienced cavers to retrieve the first aid kit, while another was sent to the surface to alert a rescue team. After a few minutes, Boone began to regain consciousness, though he was confused and he couldn't remember the date. As Paget continued to keep pressure on the wound, he noticed that Boone's hands were going numb, and the injured man started to complain about pain in his back, a worrying sign that there might be a more serious injury. When the first aid kit arrived, Paget carefully dressed the head wound and then did his best to make Boone comfortable. creating a makeshift tent with a garbage bag and a candle to keep him warm. They placed him on extra clothing for insulation, and they wrapped him in a space blanket. The Conservancy members who hadn't been involved in the incident were then carefully guided out of the cave, leaving only the experienced cavers to assist in Boone's care. Rescue teams arrived soon after, moving swiftly into the cave with additional gear and supplies. They assessed Boone's condition, determined he could be moved, and set up a sked stretcher, which is a flexible rescue stretcher that could help them transport him through the narrow passages. It took a team of 18 people to maneuver Boone through the cave, using a haul system to help lift him up the steep climb-out sections. The cave's narrow, twisting tunnels made every step challenging, but the rescue team's skill and teamwork ensured Boone's safety. After several intense hours, the group finally reached the cave's entrance, where an ambulance waited. Boone was loaded into the vehicle at 7:30 p.m., and paramedics quickly transported him to the hospital for further treatment. He was found to have had a cracked vertebrae in addition to a scalp wound and various other injuries from the fall. The cave exploration adventure in Pettyjohn's Cave was supposed to be an exciting introduction to the underground world for the Conservancy members. However, it quickly became a lesson on the importance of having the right equipment, planning, and safety measures when going on a cave expedition. 2 separate people were injured in falls, both due to not wearing hard hats properly. This incident showed just how easily injuries can happen in these extreme environments. This incident serves as a reminder that thorough preparation can make the difference between a fun adventure and a dangerous one. Robert Boone's serious injury, which included a head cut and a broken bone in his back, could have been prevented with a few simple safety measures. Not wearing chin straps on the hard hats and using handheld lights instead of helmet-mounted ones left people vulnerable to injury and made it harder for them to move and climb safely in the cave. In the tight, slippery spaces of a cave, having both hands free and reliable lighting is important in order to avoid accidents. Helmet-mounted lights provide much-needed hands-free light, while chin straps help keep helmets in place in case of a fall. When the cave environment includes steep climbs, rocky floors, and narrow spaces, having the right safety gear is crucial to minimizing risks. As one of the experienced leaders on this trip, Alan Paget knew that there were problems with the preparation and equipment. He later thought that there should have been more focus on safety gear and experienced supervision for such a large number of new cavers. Ideally, Paget suggested, the group should have been organized with one experienced guide for every 3 or 4 beginners to ensure close supervision and support. This would have allowed for quicker response times and better safety, especially in difficult sections like the Z-bends. Additionally, with more experienced cavers spread throughout the groups, any problems or discomfort could have been addressed quickly, reducing the chance of injuries or incidents. This experience in Pettyjohn's Cave showed the importance of careful planning and equipment preparation. Paget himself felt that the lack of safety planning left the group more vulnerable than necessary. And while the cave tour itself was possible and safe under the right conditions, it needed more thoughtful pre-trip preparation to anticipate and manage potential problems. The incident showed that even with experienced cavers present, poor planning can lead to dangerous situations. By learning from these mistakes, future caving trips can feature more prepared people, ensuring that everyone who enters a cave comes out safely, with stories of wonder rather than worry. As we wrap up this story of exploration, adventure, and the unexpected challenges in Pettyjohn's Cave, we are reminded of just how unpredictable the world beneath the surface can be. Caving offers incredible beauty and discovery, but it also comes with risks that require respect and preparation. As the warmth of summer faded in August of 2007, a group of professional cavers tried to tackle all 8 miles of Fitton Cave in the state of Arkansas. The cave's grueling challenges took their toll on the cavers as frigid air tightened their lungs. That day, Fitton Cave nearly claimed the life of 63-year-old Bill France after he tried a risky maneuver without ropes. His team scrambled to save him, and their efforts became the gold standard for cavers all over the world. See how his team beat meet the rescuers at their own job as we explore the story of Fitton Cave's incredible rescue. Fitton Cave is one of the largest underground systems in the state of Arkansas. It lies beneath the Buffalo National River Park, along with over 300 sister caves beneath the Ozark Plateau. Fitton is closed to the public because of the widespread and deadly white nose syndrome. White nose syndrome is a fungal infection that grows on bats while they're hibernating. As it grows, it eats holes in the bat's wings, nose, and ears. The damage caused by the fungus wakes the bats from their hibernation, causing them to move and expand extra energy until they eventually die. Cavers can accidentally spread microscopic fungal spores into the caves, where they can populate and decimate the bat population inside. Professional speleologists who know how to check for signs of the fungus can still access the cave via a permit from the geologists stationed at the Buffalo River Park. So far, over 8 miles of underground tunnels have been mapped in Fitton, though cavers believe more passages could be unearthed. On that day, 8 cavers ventured into Fitton to map new details, check on the health of the cave's ecosystem, and test their mettle against the cave's dangerous challenges. They started their journey in the beauty entrance because it's the easier main entrance to the cave. The second entrance is closed for roughly half the year starting August 15th because of seasonal rains. This group was only 2 weeks away from the rainy season when they entered. They were dangerously close to flooding and sudden disaster below ground. They descended down mostly vertical and steep passages to the roundhouse room, and from there, they entered the crystal room before climbing up to the tea room. It sounds like a simple trek, but reaching the tea room was a monumental task. While the total length of the cave is only 1/3 the length of a marathon, it takes almost twice as long to complete. By this point, the team had been exploring for nearly 8 hours deep underground. Remember, these aren't your friendly vacation caves. These cavers had been ducking, crawling, climbing, and putting their whole bodies through intense physical strain for a full workday. The ages of the group ranged from 22 to 63, so while some members were at peak condition, others were starting to feel the strain. They pushed through their fatigue and reached the next room. This area is called the 21 Jumps. Multiple rivers all converged in this room, creating a tiered cavern with multiple levels and deep gaps separating some of the sections. Active waterways surged through the channels as the cavers entered the room. To cross through the area safely, cavers could climb down some of the cliffs to lower levels and then up the sides of a different spire to bypass the rivers. Other cavers chose the faster, more athletic route, where explorers must climb above the water to a higher level and then jump from one section to the next. The so-called jumps aren't too far apart. Some just require a single step to cross, and others just require cavers to stretch their legs from one ledge to the next. Literally jumping in caves is usually forbidden because it's inherently risky. If humidity gets too saturated, the small ledges can get slippery, and the sudden weight of a person landing on the rock could cause it to break free. This section is even more dangerous once you learn that cavers traverse the 21 jumps without ropes. Bill France was the eldest member of the party at 63 years old. He wasn't leading the pack, but he was managing his way through Fitton without much hassle. Bill went to cross one of the ledges when tragedy struck. He wasn't sure what happened, and none of the other cavers saw it either. Somehow, he tumbled backward. He reached forward, but his hands couldn't find anything to grip in the narrow void. Bill saw only darkness rush past him as he fell 6 feet down. His body instinctively leaned to mitigate the fall, but then he tried to extend his back. Maybe he was trying to wedge himself in the crack to prevent falling, but instead, he cracked his head and back against the stone. The impact sent him rolling another 6 feet down. Bill was still conscious when he finally hit the floor of the room, but he wasn't himself. The pain of the impact had sent his body into panic mode, and for some strange reason, he couldn't feel the ground. He didn't know he had landed. The chilly earthen floor of the cave felt like air, or maybe like nothing at all. Bill was on the floor of Fitton Cave, flailing his arms and legs as if he was still in free fall. His hands banged against the stone, and he cried out frantic groans as he rolled around. The splunking team heard the fall and looked down to see that Bill was moving erratically, and as he thrashed, he was inching closer and closer to the edge. Fellow caver Will Heltsley quickly shimmied down one of the cracks to Bill's aid. Once he got to his side, he was able to grab Bill and talk to him. Bill's wide eyes met Will's, Will's, and Will was able to calm Bill down enough to stop him from pushing himself closer to yet another fall. Bill's mind slowly started to catch up to what was happening as his pain overcame his fear. Will acted fast. He gently eased Bill into a neutral position and stabilized his head and neck. Then, he grabbed some materials like excess clothing and his own backpack. He rolled up some softer materials and placed them under Bill's neck for support, and then placed larger materials next to his head to prevent him from accidentally moving his head and neck. Bill was struggling to feel in the moments after the fall, which was a bad sign. Even though he could feel pain now, his friends had to check for serious injury. Will and the rest of the team immediately recognized that Bill might have damaged his spine from the fall. Any further moves could worsen his injuries, so thankfully, they knew how to create a temporary splint for Bill's neck and head. Lucky for Bill, he had 7 other cavers with him. Usually, caving groups consist of only a few people, so if someone gets injured, the other cavers might not be strong enough to save them. With their combined might, they were able to delicately lift Bill while keeping his head and neck stable. Once he was raised just a few inches from the ground, they were able to remove his backpack. Bill realized he had another injury as the team lifted him off the ground. The sudden pressure and pulling on his limbs sent shock waves of pain jolting from his shoulder down to his hands and up into his core. His hands became hot with pressure and blood as they slowly brought him down. But to get Bill into a comfortable position, they would have to move him more and subject him to more pain. They heaved him off the ground again to slide the camera strap and film pouch off his torso. Then, they unhooked the clasps of his helmet to check for injuries. Removing his helmet would also let his head rest flatter on their makeshift splint. Then, his fellow cavers performed a log roll. One member held Bill's head to keep it straight, while other members overlapped their arms on Bill's side with their knees against his other side. Together, they all pulled at once, while the members at the other end kept Bill's legs straight to prevent his spine from twisting. From this position, Bill could rest without pressure on his bad shoulder. At this point, some of the cavers were discussing who would leave to call for help, but no one was leaving until they knew Bill was stable. Supporting members of the team dug into Bill's caving pack, and others reached into their own packs. They pulled out an insulating blanket and draped it over him. They also took out heat packs and laid them under the blanket to provide warmth. Bill's fellow cavers were top-of-the-line pros. They knew they needed to do injury and orientation checks to get a general idea about what Bill was experiencing. The results of these tests would give rescuers crucial information to expedite the extraction process, saving rescuers time and getting Bill out faster by ensuring they brought the exact tools needed for the job. Bill was in luck yet again. All checks came back clear. The fall had screwed with his perception for a few moments, but now he only had a sensitive area where his head hit the stone wall, bruised ribs from landing on the floor, and a dislocated collarbone. While painful, these injuries were nothing compared to what could have happened. Bill narrowly avoided disaster. The team allowed him to sit up so that he could drink water and let his nerves calm down. With Bill stabilized, 5 members of the team left the cave through a different exit. They chose to depart through the wet entrance, which snaked through the cold rivers and a waterfall above this room. The deadly water of this entrance is the reason part of the cave is closed for half the year. They went up the wet entrance because this route was only a little over a quarter mile away versus the 7-hour trek back the way they came. It seemed like an obvious choice if they wanted to prioritize Bill's safety, but this decision was risky. On the one hand, the team could get to the surface and call for help faster, but on the other hand, 3 members of this group left their extra warming gear behind with Bill. This route was significantly colder than their planned exit route, so the combination of fast-moving water and extreme cold could easily lead to more accidents. The team fought their way up the frothing waters as they battled for grip along the smooth stone surfaces of Fitton Cave. The 3 cavers who had removed some of their layers dug deep as their bodies began to go numb from the cold. Meanwhile, Jonah Shackner and John Tinsley remained by Bill's side to monitor his condition. The 2 grabbed a notebook and began logging Bill's vital signs. These notes could alert them of any changes in Bill's condition. If his pulse was gradually changing, or if his respiratory rate suddenly spiked, they could immediately prepare other first aid techniques to delay his condition from getting worse. Those logs would also be useful for paramedics when extracting Bill from the cave. Bill's arm was still in severe pain from his dislocated clavicle. The collarbone, or clavicle, could be dislocated on either side. One side attaches to the sternum, or breastplate between the rib cage, and the other attaches to the AC joint. Since the pain radiated from his shoulder, the team of professional cavers concluded that Bill's collarbone was likely dislocated at the AC joint. Jonah and John realized they could use clothing to create a sling that pinned Bill's arm to his chest to prevent it from moving, while also keeping it in a natural position to prevent further injury. Up above, the team of 5 cavers exited Fitton and called for rescue. They reached Chuck Bidding, who worked as the Buffalo National River Park's cave specialist. Bidding dispatched his own search and rescue team that staffed trained cavers and emergency paramedics. He also contacted local emergency crews at the nearby town of Harrison. Harrison's own firefighters, ambulance, and police rallied to Fitton for the rescue. The local Arkansas Caving Club, the Middle Ozark Lower Earth Society, or MOLS, also sent some volunteers to help save Bill from the crushing darkness of Fitton Cave. Back at the wet entrance, the 3 members with lighter gear stayed outside to wait for rescuers, while Will Heltsley and Matt Covington re-entered the cave after eating a short meal. They also borrowed gear from the other cavers since they were going back through the dangerous wet entrance again, and with less support. Despite being cold and tired, Matt and Will pushed their bodies to the limit and overcame the waters of Fitton. Once they reached Bill, the group reflected on what could have happened. They were all worn down by the cave prior to the accident. 7.5 hours in a grueling, cold, cramped cave is enough to break even the strongest people. There could have been mud on the ledge, but regardless of what it was that made Bill slip, he was lucky he didn't roll into the rivers or fall into a deeper crack or pinball his way down the twisting vertical chambers of the cave. Rescue teams arrived and debated on how and where they would enter the cave. The wet entrance was close, but it was also dangerous. Rescuers should rig ropes through difficult water sections for their own safety and for the person being rescued. This would take significant time since there weren't adequate anchors in place already. Rescuers would have to stand in the wet tunnels while they worked on rigging lines, which would make the work harder, and the extreme cold would force cavers to rotate members more frequently. They'd be wearing themselves down while Bill was suffering deep underground. The first responders decided to rig some lines through the waterfalls and charge through the wet entrance to Fitton. Inside the cave, Bill and his fellow cavers decided on a self-rescue. Bill was given the green light to stand up on his own and make the trip out of the cave with the help of 4 of his fellow cavers. They had no idea the rescue team was coming, but they also chose to rig ropes as they progressed to keep Bill safe. They would need to keep close tabs on Bill since he was only able to use one arm. Bill connected his harness once more, and then his teammates connected ropes from his harness to their own. That way, if Bill slipped again, they could prevent him from sliding away down the subterranean rivers. They also helped him by providing support and even holding him through challenging sections. It's likely that one of the cavers stayed a dozen or so feet behind the main group as a last line of defense in case more disaster struck. The team battled through rivers that went up to their chest as the chilly waters sapped the warmth from their veins. They also had to overcome 4 small climbing sections. Bill used all his strength in his good arm to move up the sides of the cave without rubbing his damaged arm and torso against the rock. With the added safety measures in place, Bill conquered these climbs. Shortly afterward, the team escorting Bill met the first call-out team, the first rescuers who were slowly making their way to them as they rigged lines. These rescuers double-checked the vital logs and reassessed Bill's condition for safety. Bill was clearly doing well, so the rescuers joined with the caving group and kept an eye on the team in case anything went wrong. Somehow, Bill pulled through a crawl with just one arm, even as the tight space pressed against his injured collarbone. The final challenge was the long climb to the exit. Thankfully, the first call-out team had already rigged this section. With painkillers administered and his spirits returning, Bill and the rest of the crew exited Fitton Cave at 5 a.m. the next day. Bill hiked back to his camp to gather his things before departing to the hospital. It turns out Bill's team contained members of the National Cave Rescue Commission, so they were able to execute a nearly flawless rescue on their own. Bill's miraculous story is a stark contrast compared to the way novices handle caving accidents. The team's quick thinking and medical knowledge saved Bill's life, which bolstered his indomitable spirit. The team of cavers became their own rescuers, giving Bill the courage to exit Fitton Cave on his own 2 legs in spite of his injury.